TV for life.
Good evening and welcome to Face to Face for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh Aliathambi. I'm delighted to welcome to our studio this evening Farzana Baduel, who is a trustee of the Halo Trust. And for those of you who may not know what the Halo Trust is, it is the largest organization involved in demining in the world. And demining means all those mines which are sown by various sides in any conflict around the world. The Halo Trust and its demining teams are the guys who go out there and clear those once the hostilities have ended, because those mines will last literally for decades and they are a huge safety issue for the public. And in Sri Lanka also, the Halo Trust is the largest organization which is involved in demining. So good evening and welcome, Farzana. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so Farzana, 300,000 mines.
Yeah.
You got to that milestone in Sri Lanka. You removed 300,000 mines in this small country of ours, in the north mainly. Tell us about the work, and it's a staggering number of mines as well.
It is. So the Halo Trust have been in Sri Lanka since 2002. So they've been here for an incredibly long period of time. And to remove landmines is incredibly time consuming and laborious. And of course, safety is paramount. And so in total, since 1992, the Halo Trust team, which is predominantly locally, is a local team, have actually removed 1 million explosive items, of which 300,000 are landmines. So there is also unexploded ordnance. There is also the improvised explosive devices as well. So you have three main explosives. You've got the mines, which are not just in the land, they're also in the lagoon, they're also in the coast. And when they're in water, they are particularly difficult to remove for obvious reasons.
So you mentioned that almost all your team members are local. How does that come about? What is the training that you give them, and how big is your team?
So since 1992, the team of Halo Trust deminers and the support staff have ranged between 800 and 1,200 people. And so it's one of the largest employers in the Northern Province. And the philosophy that we have in Halo Trust is we have very minimal international staff. And so with these numbers of staff, at the moment, for instance, only 5 are international staff, of which one of them is Sri Lankan, who has joined the international program of staff. So it's very core to us that the money that we receive goes to the local communities, and that means employment, because there's multiple ways to make impact. One of them, of course, is demining, but there's also the way to make impact is to ensure that we have the largest number of locals in our team so that the income can go back into the communities. So that's really critical. And it does mean that there's a huge emphasis upon recruitment and orientation and safety training and skills development. So that is a very core part of what Halo Trust does. And of course, in the North, a lot of the local people that we brought in, they had their education interrupted because of the conflict. And so some of them have gaps in their primary, secondary and tertiary education. So then therefore the onboarding for Halo Trust of the local staff has to also compensate for those aspects as well.
Right. Now, this is incredibly dangerous work. You don't know where the mines are when you start. Take us through how this process works, because it is a very scientific process that you follow. You don't just send your team members walking around to try to find mines. How does this work?
Because we're the largest humanitarian NGO focused on demining, and we've been doing it since 1992. We have a body of expertise, and it's useful that we are in, for instance, 32 different countries and territories around the world. That enables us to cross-pollinate and learn and really hone our approach to it. So there's multiple phases involved, and the first is really to identify which land is contaminated and which one is clear. And so we start off with doing a survey. And with a survey, there's multiple layers that we need to do. So first of all, we ask, for instance, in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan army, they give us information in terms of where the mines were placed and from their records.
That's the mines laid by the army.
Exactly, the mines laid by the army. And then we do not obviously have the records access for the LTTE because they didn't, have that level of sort of administration supporting the mines that were placed. And so we work very well with the Sri Lankan army who can give us that indication. We then go to the villages because they have a lot of knowledge about where the mines were, because they will remember that a mine went off in this part or that part, or their livestock were injured, or indeed, any of their domestic pets, for instance. And so they are also able to help us orient along with the records that we get from the Sri Lankan army in terms of where the mines are. Once we've then identified those areas, we then take the next step, which is we use the equipment that we have. And again, Sri Lanka is actually quite complicated compared to some of the other parts in the world. So first of all, Sri Lanka is one of the densest in terms of the number of mines in the concentrated area in the whole world. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. The second is also the soil is highly mineralized, and that plays havoc with our detection equipment. So the first thing that the deminers do is that once they've identified possible areas of contamination, they make sure that they have, these red signs that clearly say, that this is a minefield, beware. So they put those up. They then go to the schools and to the local areas to do risk education. Because of course, if you cordon off the contaminated areas, what you don't want is children who think that, let's go and play there, because they may not necessarily understand the dangers. So the risk education is a core part of what we do, going to schools, going to the local villages, going to the local communities and letting them know. And we have identified 17 different types of mines. Some are LTTE mines, others are Sri Lankan army mines. And those 17 mines we take to the schools and the local communities so that they can visibly see what do these mines look like, to make sure they don't think that it's a toy. And that's really important because, they're quite small. And sometimes when you have, landslides or, you had the tsunami or, cyclones, sometimes they can come up from, the soil and peep out, and children are naturally very curious. So they will see something and they may want to go and touch it, and then that could then explode. So the risk education is critical. So we make sure that we cordon off the contaminated land, and then we go and do the risk education, which is ongoing. It's not one-off, it's always ongoing. And then the second thing that we do is we bring out our metal detectors. And then we have these markers that whenever the metal detection goes off, we put the marker in. But the problem with the metal detectors, they will detect if it's metal, mines, or the mineral that is in the soil. So you don't know which of the three they are. So once we put the markers in, we then use another enhanced equipment which has radar technology that enables us to identify if it's minerals, mines, or metals. So it's actually quite complicated with multiple steps. And once that has been identified, that there's a mine there, only then do the deminers, of which, of the team in the Halo Trust in Sri Lanka, 42% are women.
That's very interesting.
Gender is a very important area for us in terms of balance. And there's also a lot of women-led households in the north because they lost, their husbands and so forth. And so therefore it's very important to engage with women. So we often have multiple generations where we have the mothers and the daughters or the mothers and the sons and, and working side by side. And we have these units of these teams of 9. And often the unit commanders are women. And so they're not only deminers, they're also in leadership positions as well. And then in each of these teams, each individual pod is a team of 9. 2 of them are health professionals because safety is paramount. I mean, it's explosives that we're dealing with, and we have to make sure that we protect our staff. And so what we do is that they go in and they start to excavate using tools and manually they excavate. And you have to be very careful because if it's an anti-tilt mine, you do not want to go anywhere near it because movement can trigger it. So that's why they have to visibly know out of the 17 miles, is it anti-personnel? Is it anti-vehicle? Is it the sort of mine that gets, that gets exploded if you put pressure here or there? Or is it the anti-tilt? If you make a movement, it will go off. So they need to be experts to be able to visually identify what sort of mine it is. And then the way they remove it, it has to be done according to the type of mine that it is. You have a different standard operating procedure for the different types of mines that are involved. And all of this they have to learn. And they have to be constantly trained. Even if they go on holiday, they go on annual leave, they get refresher courses when they come back. So we are constantly training, retraining, repeat, reinforcement. So it is really, front of mind. And we have to make sure also, in the hot heat, for instance, or when it's monsoon, we can't have them working for a long time because if they get tired,
they'll make mistakes.
Yeah. So it's a lot. It's a lot for them. And the heroes are not someone like me that sits on the board and shuffles papers. The heroes of Halo Trust are actually the deminers. And these deminers we always bring in from the communities that have been displaced because they work with purpose. It's for their families. It's for their friends. It's for their communities. They're the ones who put themselves on the line to remove the mines. They are the heroes of Halo Trust.
So once the mine is removed, what do you do with it? How do you ensure that it's not live anymore?
So I went to go and see with my own eyes. I took a car up to Jaffna because I wanted to know exactly what the process is. So once they identify the mine, what they do is they excavate in order to see the visibility of the mine. So then they can see what type of mine it is. Then they ensure that they bring in the unit commander, who is the head of the team of 9, because they are the most experienced. And some of the deminers have been working in Halo Trust for 5, 10, 15 years, and very experienced people. And they then carefully remove the mine. And then the first thing they try and do is remove the detonator from the explosive material. And if they are able to do that, they put it in 2 separate boxes, and then they walk. Even the way they walk is mandated, where one box is kept in front, one in the back. So there is no way that they can end up, touching each other. Then what they do, they end up at the end of their shift, when they collect the mines, you have the Sri Lankan army there observing, and it's important for the Sri Lankan army to make sure that these explosives and these mines are destroyed. And so they are often there present, and it's put in a cage which can take no more than 20 mines. And then it's put in the field. Everyone takes, a huge distance back. And then there is a sort of like breadcrumbs of sort of like sawdust. And then and it creates a bit of a fuse, and then they're set alight. And it takes quite a long time, and it's almost like popcorn. That no more than 20 mines. I saw 4 mines in this cage, and they set it alight. We all stood way back. The Sri Lankan army were there, observer status. We were all watching, and then you just see it explode. And then it's been done. At the end of every shift, all of the deminers are searched to make sure that no explosives are taken out, because it's not just the mines. We also find, for instance, grenades, and we find improvised devices. And it's very important. Weapons control is a very important part of our role. What we don't want to do is take things out and then they end up in other people's hands. So that is a very critical part of the work we do. And that's why the Halo Trust work very collaboratively with the Sri Lankan army to ensure that they are removed and they are destroyed. And that is a very critical part of what we do.
Right. Now, you mentioned the north. Is it prevalent in all the districts in the north? And what about the east as well, where there was a lot of fighting?
So there's actually a number of different organizations that are demining. So Halo Trust is obviously the largest, and they have taken Kilinochchi and Jaffna, and they've taken Mulativo. And they are very, very complex areas, because you have the jungle there, you have lagoons, you also have the incidence of it being coastal mines. So they give a lot of the complicated demining to Halo just because of its expertise. You also have MAG, which is another British demining charity, not as large as Halo Trust, a very well-respected, very competent organization that we work very closely with. And they're given other regions that are underneath sort of where we are. And then you also have, for instance, the Sri Lankan army. They also have a demining unit. Again, they are brilliant at what they are doing. And then we also have a number of Sri Lankan organizations such as DASH. And what's wonderful about all these mining organizations is they are very purpose-led. They work very well together. They're very collaborative, and they're often convened together to share best practice, work together collaboratively, understand the nuances of which organizations are best at which type of mine removal or risk education, and they ensure that they work together, which is very, very important. And they all have and share the mission of making Sri Lanka mine-free.
Right, and that is so vital in order to bring normalcy back to those areas. And like you said, there are just so many mines and other explosive devices.
Yes.
It's almost unimaginable that there are so many. And you mentioned that Sri Lanka has the highest concentration.
Yeah, one of them.
Any guesses as to why that was? Is it that the fighting was sort of confined to these particular districts, and there was a lot of fighting over so many decades?
Yes, absolutely. So the conflict, was it 27 years it spanned?
Yes.
And so a prolonged period of time. And then also the land, much smaller area was restricted for the conflict. So you had the northern, province. And so a mixture of both is what ended up resulting in Sri Lanka being one of the most densest in terms of mine contamination in the world.
Right. Now, you mentioned that the Halo Trust is operating in 32 countries. Could you tell us about some of those cases? And I presume that some are conflicts which are perhaps ongoing, and then there may be conflicts which go back to even to World War II.
Yes, absolutely. So the Halo Trust, they are a very unique organization because they are first in. You see, when there's mines laid out, other NGOs can't enter until we clear the path.
Right.
Even, the food NGOs, shelter, nobody can enter until the path has been cleared by us. And so we are first in, and we hope to be first out. We want to go in, stay, and do it as quickly as possible and leave. And so what happens is that we end up in conflict countries and regions as well as post-conflict. And really what we are is we are a bridge, and we're a healing bridge, because actually when there's conflict and there's mines on the ground, until you take them all out, true healing of a conflict will not happen, because the scars are there in the ground. And that's what we do. Now, we are in countries like Ukraine, which there's an active conflict. We are in Gaza. We are in Syria. We are in Libya. We are in Afghanistan. We are in the Solomon Islands. We are all over, and there are mines that have been laid, from decades that just governments haven't been able to understand how to demine or how to have the funding to take out the demining, and they've just cordoned off. So land has just been lost, where the locals have been displaced and they can't go back to the land, they can't go back to their homes. Farmers, they cannot use the land in order for their livelihoods, because it's not just about protecting lives, it's also about protecting livelihoods as well. A lot of these countries, they rely upon having fertile farmland, and they're untouched for decades. And so we give back the livelihoods, which is so critical and important as well.
Now, you mentioned the Solomon Islands.
Yes.
That would be back in World War II, because as far as I know, they haven't had a conflict since then.
Yes, absolutely. So it goes back so far, and that's why Halo Trust is in 32 countries and regions, and there are more coming online as well that Halo is now working towards, because it is, unfortunately, conflict is now the norm. And there are active conflicts, and it's not going anywhere fast, which means that there are more and more countries, more and more regions that require demining. And the good news is that because we've been doing it for so long, we are beginning to invest an awful lot of money into technology, into robotics, into radar technology, in order to take something that is so time-consuming and painstaking and risky for the deminers, and bringing that level of investment in technology so that we can actually take all of our learnings, apply technology and AI in order to make sure that we can reduce the amount of time that is required for the demining, so we can give the land back, give homes back, and give livelihoods back.
But technology does advance quite rapidly.
Yes.
But in the end, you have to have human beings who are doing the physical work.
Yes, absolutely. But I'll give you an example in Sri Lanka, because there are mines in the lagoons, and there's also mines in the coastal parts. We have the United States government have very kindly donated a number of bespoke equipment, which are amphibious excavators, huge, and they can go into the lagoons and into the coastal areas, and they can actually use their excavators to, filter and find out the sort of, clumps that are bigger than this that could potentially be mines, and that then protects the deminers from having to go in. And also it's very difficult because the other equipment we had would then end up sinking in the lagoons, and so having this sort of new generation of equipment allows us to ensure that for the deminers that we reduce the risk that they face, and also for us to go in hard to reach areas to extract the mines. So the technology is helping, and those amphibious excavators are unique. A team came from the United States to survey the land, survey the problem, and then bring that back and then adapt the equipment in order for us to then be able to utilize that.
Right. I mean, one of the things that we don't quite realize is that our conflict in Sri Lanka was in fact an amphibious one. We had the lagoons, we had boat operations on the lagoons, we had soldiers and LTT cardos crossing those lagoons. So the defenses in the form of mines were laid around lagoons, coastal areas, beaches, and so on. So it's incredibly complex, isn't it?
Very complex. And what's been incredible to witness is the level of innovation of the Sri Lankan team has been incredible, because my biggest takeaway, what I learned from my trip when I went to Kilinochchi and Jaffna, was actually the complexity in Sri Lanka for the mine removal is very unique. And they started having to create unique standard operating processes to remove, and it's not just in the lagoons and also in the coastal, but there's also artificial hills that were created as a defense sort of mechanism, and the mines are buried there, and that leads to very sort of logistical challenges in removing those mines, of which a precedent wasn't set. And so what the Sri Lankan team have done, they have created these innovative SOPs to remove them, and because Halo Trust are in 32 countries and territories around the world, that unique innovation and SOPs will then be deployed in other countries. So the Sri Lankan talent and the innovation that they have created is actually going to benefit other parts of the world where they are also now dealing with submerged mines and have to remove them in aquatic environments.
Right. So it's a very complex area indeed, that the Halo Trust is operating in so many countries, and this is indeed a very interesting discussion. We need to take a short commercial break now. I am in conversation with Farzana Baduel, who is a trustee of the Halo Trust. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
Valuable FD, the symbol of stability.
Honorable Julian Hill, Australia's Assistant Minister for International Education, Citizenship, Customs and Multicultural Affairs, sits down for an exclusive interview. Big questions, direct answers. This Thursday at 6:30 p.m.
See tomorrow's legends today. Unleashed, unstoppable. Under 19's battle for Asian supremacy. Witness the future greatness. Under 19's Asia Cup 2025 UAE, December 12th to 21st, live and exclusively on TV1.
Valuable FD, the symbol of stability.
විදේශ සම්මාන දිනු සිනමාධ්‍යක්ෂවරයෙකුගේ නව චිත්‍රපට නිර්මාණයට රාජ්‍ය අනුග්‍රහය ලබා දිය යුතුද?
අපේ දේශීය නළු නිලයන්ට මේ චිත්‍රපට සමග කටයුතු කිරීමෙන් ජාත්‍යන්තරයට යන්න අවස්ථාව ලැබෙනවා. චිත්‍රපටයකට ආයෝජනය කරන්න රාජ්‍ය ආර්ථික ස්ථාවරත් එක්ක නැහැ. ලාංකික සිනමාව දැන් වෙනකොට හොඳ මට්ටමක තියෙනවා.
Sirasa Debater with AAT Sri Lanka.
ඉරිදා සවස 6ට.
ප්‍රාණ සමදියනිය වෙනුවෙන් සියල්ල ගෙනිපත් කරන
මේ හොඳට හිටපු මලට මේ කරපු එකෙකුටව හිනාවෙන් දෙට තියන්නේ මම. ඔබගේ ළඟිට වෙන තියෙත් එක දැක ඔබේ අම්මා මැරෙනවා බල බල. ඔබේ තාත්තට පිස්සු හැදෙනවා දැකලා. තෝ මැරෙන්න ඕනේ.
පීතෘ පලි ගැනීමක සාධාරණයේ තීන්දුව ආලේ
හෙට රාත්‍රී 8ට
සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
Valuable FD, the symbol of stability.
ඒ බන්ධනාගාර දඬුවමින් කාටවත් ගැලවිල්ලක් නැහැ. මොන හයිකාරයෙක්ටවත් මොන කපටිකමින්වත් ඒකෙන් බේරෙන්න බෑ සහන්.
ඔයා ගිහිල්ලා පැහැසිවත් නලවන්න මෙතුලිවත් නලවන්න තව වෙලාව තිබුණොත් අර චමෝදිවත් අරන් නලවන්නකෝ.
මගේ පුතාව කූඩුවේ දාලා ඉන්නවා. මොකද්ද ඌ කරපු වැරද්ද? ඒක දැනගන්න මට අයිතියක් නැද්ද?
ඔයා නෙමෙයි මගේ හිත රිද්දන්නේ. මම හැම වෙලාවෙම ඔයාගේ හිත රිද්දන්නේ.
Sirasa ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
When you listen to the numbers, it's huge, which is why we also identify this as one of the largest catastrophes, disasters that has ever fallen on Sri Lanka. As you said, 1/5 of the country is actually affected in terms of land mass, and 2.3 million is a huge number in terms of our population as well.
And that really would take anywhere from 3 to 6 months just to make sure that people's immediate food security needs have been taken care of. What we also always try to do in these situations is, even as we're planning our emergency response, that we already start thinking and building into it ways to support people's early recovery.
There is a disconnect between, the people's ability, understanding the people's ability to, respond to these disasters, and also, people's ability to also, express how they can respond to them as well.
Valuable FD, the symbol of stability.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am with Farzana Baduel, who is a trustee of the Halo Trust, which is the largest demining organization in the world. Now, Farzana, tell me a little bit about how the Halo Trust finances its operations. It's a massive operation around the world, and it must be taking a lot of resources. So where do you get the funding? And in today's world, funding is getting scarce, isn't it?
Yes. We're at Halo Trust, we're incredibly grateful for the support that we receive. So we obviously, as a British charity, we receive support from the British government, and also in Sri Lanka, for instance, specifically, the United States have been a huge supporter in terms of technical assistance, technical equipment, as well as financial. And Japan, for instance, have supported the program in Sri Lanka every single year. So they have been very consistent. We've also had support from Norway, from Canada, from Switzerland as well. And so that really does help. And working with the Sri Lankan government, working with the Sri Lankan military, and also working with the other demining organizations in Sri Lanka. And that spirit of collaboration and technical sharing is, I think, what makes it a shared sort of mission that has made it as effective as it has been.
Well, it's wonderful to see so many countries stepping up in what was not their conflict, but it's clearly a humanitarian mission. So we must never forget that these countries did step up and supported. Now, just to give our viewers a little bit more detail about Farzana Baduel, apart from being a trustee of the Halo Trust, you are, my goodness, you have so many hats. I wonder how you do all this. You are the founder and CEO of Curzon PR in the UK. You are the president-elect of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, CIPR, and you are a trustee of the Soho Theatre and a trustee of the British Asian Trust, and you also are a resident PR expert at the University of Oxford's Said Business School. So I don't know how you do all that, but it's wonderful to see. And I have a question about the CIPR, the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, which is present here in Sri Lanka as well, and has been for I think you've had members here for perhaps 20 or 25 years, and you'll be taking over as president next year. What are your plans, especially with regard to countries like Sri Lanka?
So naturally, although I was born and brought up in the UK, my parents came from Pakistan. So I'm very interested in the global south, and particularly the importance of storytelling and connecting this Chartered Institute of Public Relations with countries around the world. So the international element is very important. My second sort of area of mandate is artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is probably the one issue that is impacting our industry, both for positive and negative. So it's really how to future-proof the storytelling industry, understanding how AI will impact and understanding the ethical aspects, the inherent bias that comes in with certain algorithms, and also how it's going to transform and how can we future-proof our profession of public relations. And then the third area that's really critical is lifelong learning, which is what I'm really championing in the CIPR, because especially with AI, lifelong learning is throughout your life, because you have to constantly learn. One thing about media and public relations and marketing is the sort of the tectonic plates underneath are constantly shifting, and so you have to always learn about the evolving information technology and all of the tools. And so the learning piece is very important. But Sri Lanka is very special for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, because for the first time, the Chartered Institute of Public Relations has announced that it will make an ambassador to promote the Chartered Institute of Public Relations in a specific country. And the first country, guess which one?
Sri Lanka, I hope.
Exactly, because Sri Lankans have a reputation for valuing education, valuing qualifications. And for instance, the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, my understanding is that it has become incredibly successful here. And there is an awful lot of Sri Lankans who have really, really welcomed qualifications. And so the CIPR understand how important education and qualifications are to the Sri Lankan community. And so therefore what the CIPR will do, other than just looking to grow its membership here, both from a corporate affiliate perspective as well as individual, they also are planning to come to Sri Lanka, who's leading the education team, on how they can work with Sri Lankan learning institutions in order to bring in professional accreditation, continual professional development programs that leads to the highest qualification in public relations, which is the Chartered. So the CIPR is the only organization that is Royal Chartered in the world that can give the Chartered qualification, and also work with the universities here as well to see how they can help support shape the syllabus so it's future-proofed for such a fast-moving industry. And ultimately, it's really important for Sri Lanka and to have its own storytelling and tell its story to the world. And so we want to be part of that journey in a small way. And so we're very excited about our new partnership with Sri Lanka.
Well, we can certainly look forward to a lot of activity from CIPR in Sri Lanka in the coming year. And let's get back to the Halo Trust.
Yeah.
It strikes me that these mines and IEDs and so on, there have been moves throughout the decades to ban these weapons, because they are indeed terrible weapons long after a conflict is over. A conflict might last for weeks or months or perhaps years, but the weapons are there for decades, such as in Solomon Islands and New Guinea. I mean, that's 80 years ago. That's a long, long time. And there was a treaty, I believe the Ottawa Treaty, to ban landmines, but what's happened to that?
So what's happened is a number of countries have started to pull out of the treaty.
That's very unfortunate.
Yes, and it's been based upon a pragmatic view that conflict is not going anywhere soon. There is geopolitical currents that is resulting in increased conflict around the world, and therefore the use of mines, not only in terms of offensive, but actually defensive, in order to maintain borders between countries where there is conflict. And so increasingly there's a pragmatic view that mines actually is something for defense. And that's why a number of countries are pulling up, because they have understood the other side of it. And unfortunately, until we can change the human condition into being more peaceful and less conflict-ridden, unfortunately, mines will continue.
That is indeed unfortunate, and we have so many conflicts going on in the world today that it's going to be a tough task for organizations such as the Halo Trust.
Yes.
Right. Now, coming back to Sri Lanka, you've been working here for so many decades, the Halo Trust. Is there an end in sight? Could you possibly say, well, in X number of years we hope to complete this and say Sri Lanka is mine-free or something like that?
The hope was for it to be mine-free in the next couple of years, but there's a few things that have happened to complicate it. Number one is that there's been reductions in funding. So our team have reduced from 1,200 to around 850. And of course, when we have a smaller team, it means that the number of mines that we extract decrease. So we were removing 1,000 mines per month. Now it's dropped down to around 750 mines per month. The second is that we are increasingly surveying new land and finding more contamination. And that is leading to having an extension in terms of the horizon of when Sri Lanka will be mine-free. The third that we're also facing is whenever you have a tsunami or a cyclone or you have landslides or indeed floods, when you have two separate areas, one area that's contaminated and the other that is clear, the mines, especially in aquatic conditions, they start moving and start contaminating, and then we have to resurvey. And so that is also another layer of complexity that is taking place. So what we would love to do is to raise awareness of the mines in the north, because we want Sri Lanka to be mine-free. And that can happen only if there's awareness of the demining that is taking place, increased support for the Halo Trust and other demining organizations in the north in order to make Sri Lanka mine-free. Because when it is mine-free, I think that will be an incredible chapter, a new chapter for Sri Lanka, which will be full of hope and positivity and reconciliation.
Well, as a journalist who covered the war for many years, I have seen mines being laid, and I've seen the result of the devastation to human beings, civilians, combatants, and of course animals, livestock, and so on. So it's a terrible, terrible weapon. And it's not just the mines on the ground. I mean, these IEDs were laid inside buildings and in various other locations. So it's very difficult to clear all this, isn't it?
It is, but it was very heartwarming to go to Jaffna and Kilinochchi and meet the beneficiaries. And so I met an elderly gentleman who had been displaced for 20 years. And he said that he was so tired because he was living in Jaffna and had to move him and his family every year because they couldn't get extended stay. They had to have short stay everywhere. So for 20 years, they were moving around displaced. He finally got the land back after Halo cleared the land. And then he had a beautiful house that was built. And he told me that the Sri Lankan government built this house, and he was so happy. And because the land is very fertile, because the Halo Trust, they have to till the soil to look for everything. And he showed me all of these plants that he was growing and plucked fruit from it. And he'd only been there for a couple of years, and he plucked fruit, and we ate the fruit that came from the plants that he had around his house. And he just had this incredibly peaceful aura about him. And he said, you know, I'm an old man. I have come back to my home after 20 years. The government have helped me build this house, and it was a beautiful house. I've created these plants that are feeding us and our family, and I have now managed to arrange for the marriage of my children who are now married. And he said, I now sleep peacefully. So there's beautiful stories. And you know how many people who were displaced who have got their land back because of the work of Halo Trust? Just guess.
I couldn't fathom it.
280,000 people. That's
people whose lands were, well, basically they had mines, so they couldn't move back in.
So it's also a story of positivity. It's a story of Sri Lanka coming together, the government, international sort of governments as well, you know, the Sri Lankan military, the people of Sri Lanka coming together to rebuild. And there are beautiful stories that are happening in the north. And I know the country's been through such an incredibly tough period, and it's not, you know, all rosy, but it's also important to look for those stories of hope.
Absolutely, because we tend to dwell on the negative. We tend to still say, well, we had this war for nearly 30 years, and yes, we are collectively traumatized from this, but we need to look for the positive stories to come out of that.
Yeah.
Right. And do you see anything different in terms of Sri Lanka and the other countries that Halo Trust works in, apart from the density of IEDs and mines?
I think what's astonished myself is the human talent, is the fact that they have come up with such innovative SOPs that are being deployed in other parts of the world, and also how much they have had to overcome in order to continue to work. What also I think really surprised me was that 42% are women, and so many women in leadership positions.
Is that unusual when you look at the other countries you work in?
Yes, it is, because in certain cultures it is not the norm for women to work. And so that was, and that I think just shows how sort of industrious the people are, where it's, and they come together for supporting the communities, removing the mines, man, woman, and so forth. And also what's really important for the Halo Trust is a year before we know that we will have to let go of the deminers because the field that they were working on has been cleared, we start working a year in advance in terms of giving them vocational training so that their livelihoods are not interrupted and they have jobs after they leave the Halo Trust. And that's another area that we look to support. We would like very much for local employers in Jaffna, Kilinochchi, Mulativo to come forward and approach the Halo Trust so we can build MOUs with them, and we can at Halo Trust take on the vocational training to ensure that they are ready for employment by from the local employers, because that's very important that when people leave the Halo Trust, we really care about them having the skills so that they can go and continue to provide for their families.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about the history of the Halo Trust. Whose idea was it? How did it, this idea that you need to rid the world of mines, where did it come from? It's such a noble cause.
So the history of Halo Trust is really interesting. So it is a British charity, and we had 3 co-founders that served in the British Army in Afghanistan, and they realized that the level of mine contamination was so overwhelming, required such complexity and expertise in order to remove, that they decided to found the Halo Trust in Afghanistan. And once they did that, then of course the expertise was requested all over the world. And the Halo Trust grew because they didn't end up trying to do lots of different things. They chose one thing and they just built that expertise and created a center of excellence for it. And we have the most incredible CEO called James Cowan, who's a former army general. So there's a lot of military people that are within Halo, and they're very purpose-led people, and they have served all over the world, and they don't get involved in politics. They're very pragmatic people. They go in, remove the mines, and then leave. They're focused on serving. So the culture and the ethos of Halo Trust is it's a serving culture. It's you go, you serve the people, and then you leave. And I think that simplicity of demining, building expertise, building excellence, bringing that learning, and also the culture that has come in from the military, the work ethic that comes in, that has shaped Halo Trust. And I think that is one of the DNA of Halo Trust, what makes it different from other NGOs. Right.
Now, you mentioned that the Halo Trust works in Ukraine right now, where the conflict is raging.
Yes.
So how does that work? Because you have 2 sides which are sowing mines right now, and you guys are trying to, remove the mines. Does that lead to a sort of an awkward situation?
Yeah, because it's very complex, and there's obviously a huge undercurrents of geopolitical issues that are happening in Ukraine as we speak. So it does require a lot of political sensitivity. It requires an understanding, but it also requires trust. So the Halo Trust, and that's why we have trust in the name, they build trust with the countries that they are operating in. And that is so critical, which is why we ensure that our people are local. Because that's what builds trusts, when actually our teams are made up of locals. And that enables us to go and operate in these countries, to go in, to do the work. And because we have a history of expertise and a history of not interfering, we go in, we do our work, we provide value, we leave. And that's why that enables us to work in a whole plethora of regions around the world, including active conflict regions like Ukraine.
Right. And with a country as large as the Ukraine, we are talking about a a front which is perhaps hundreds of miles long. So it's not, it's not like Sri Lanka where we were, we had a fairly large area in the north. But Ukraine is massive. It's one of the largest countries in Europe.
It is. It's huge in terms of lands. I've traveled there many times, and it was also known as the breadbasket for Europe. So it was always known for its agriculture. And so with Ukraine, it's very important to them that the landmines are removed in areas that they have taken back control, in order for the farmers to be able to continue to be able to feed the Ukrainians, as well as if there's anything left for export. And so the Ukrainians understand that it's not just about saving lives, it's also about livelihoods. And livelihoods continue to be a need even during active conflict.
So, Farzana, we are almost out of time, unfortunately. But if there is one message that you could give to the world from the experiences of Halo Trust, in terms of how we need to look at conflict and the use of landmines and other explosive devices, what would you tell the world?
I would say, with a Sri Lankan lens, that Sri Lanka has to be mine-free. And in order to do so, organizations such as the Halo Trust needs to be supported. And so I would say to those who are tuning in, go to the Halo Trust website, follow us on social media, learn about what we do, and support comes in multiple facets. It's not just financial, it's also technological, it's also vocational. There's a lot of partnerships that we can develop with organizations in Sri Lanka, and we also hope very much that you will follow our journey and support us as we make Sri Lanka mine-free. And it's also advocacy as well, raising awareness amongst your friends, your peers, in terms of what is happening with the mines and the need to make Sri Lanka mine-free. We would love to create a movement that mobilizes people to make Sri Lanka mine-free.
Farzana Baduel, thank you very much for being with us this evening. It has been an eye-opener about this incredibly complex profession which is demining, and also about the situation in Sri Lanka, in the north and the east especially, and how far we have gone in completing the demining task. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.